When Jesus said you are the light of the world, he wasn't giving you a compliment or a distant spiritual goal. He was revealing your actual identity right now. Most people think being the light means doing good deeds or shining positivity. Joel Goldsmith discovered this interpretation keeps you in spiritual darkness, searching outside yourself for what you already are. The revolutionary truth Joel taught is that light isn't something you develop or earn through spiritual practice. Light is consciousness itself, the very awareness reading these words right now. You don't become the light. You realize you never stopped being it. This single recognition transforms everything about how you pray, heal, and live. For decades, seekers have tried to cultivate their inner light through meditation, affirmations, and spiritual disciplines. Joel watched them struggle and fail because they approached light as a future achievement. He taught that the moment you stop trying to become the light and simply recognize you are the light, healing consciousness activates instantly. Daniela spent 15 years in spiritual communities trying to become more enlightened, more loving, more light-filled. She attended workshops, practiced daily meditations, and read countless books. Despite her efforts, she felt increasingly inadequate, always measuring herself against some imagined spiritual standard she could never reach. When she encountered Joel Goldsmith's teachings on being the light, something shifted immediately. He wasn't telling her to develop her light or increase her spiritual vibration. He was pointing to the consciousness that was already aware of her thoughts, her struggles, her seeking. That awareness itself was the light she'd been searching for. Within 3 weeks of this recognition, Daniela's chronic anxiety began dissolving, not because she fixed herself or became more spiritual, but because she stopped treating her true nature as something missing. The light doesn't have anxiety. The light simply is. When you know yourself as that light, the problems of the false self lose their power over you. Joel Goldsmith made a shocking statement that offended many spiritual teachers. He said that trying to become the light of the world is spiritual arrogance disguised as humility. When you believe you must develop or earn your spiritual identity, you're actually denying the truth of what you already are. You're making yourself into a project that needs improvement. This teaching challenges everything modern spirituality promotes. We're surrounded by messages about raising our vibration, clearing our chakras, and ascending to higher consciousness. Joel cut through all of it with one simple truth. Consciousness is already whole, already perfect, already light. Nothing needs to be added or achieved. The practical application changes immediately. Instead of asking, how can I become more spiritual, you ask, what am I already that doesn't need improvement? Instead of seeking light, you rest as the light that's reading these words. This shift from doing to being is the foundation of Joel's entire mystical approach to healing and transformation. Here's what being the light actually means in Joel Goldsmith's teaching. Light is the infinite consciousness that exists before thoughts, before emotions, before any human condition. It's the awareness that witnesses your entire life experience without being touched by it. When you identify as that awareness, rather than as your thoughts and problems, you've found the light. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's immediately practical. The next time anxiety arises, instead of trying to fix it or pray it away, recognize the consciousness that's aware of the anxiety. That consciousness isn't anxious. That awareness is the light, untouched by the shadow it observes. In that recognition, the anxiety loses its grip. Joel taught that every spiritual problem comes from forgetting your identity as light and believing you're the darkness you observe. Being the light means remembering what you are, not what you should become. It means resting in the consciousness that exists right now, already whole, already healed, already free. This is the secret that changes everything about spiritual practice. Henry was a successful therapist who helped hundreds of clients but couldn't help himself. His depression had followed him for 20 years through various treatments and spiritual paths. He'd learned to manage it but never felt free from it. He described himself as someone who battled darkness, trying constantly to bring more light into his troubled mind. Joel Goldsmith's teaching reached Henry at his lowest point. The statement, "You are the light of the world," struck him differently than it ever had before, not as encouragement to be better, but as a statement of present fact. What if the depression he'd been fighting wasn't happening to the real Henry at all? What if the real Henry was the awareness watching the depression? Over 6 months, Henry practiced this recognition daily. When depression came, instead of fighting it or analyzing it, he simply rested as the consciousness observing it. He stopped identifying as the depressed person and recognized himself as the light that witnessed depression passing through. Gradually, the depression's intensity decreased. After 9 months, it had dissolved completely, not through treatment, but through recognition. Jennifer's daughter was diagnosed with a learning disability that doctors said would limit her academic future. As a mother, Jennifer felt helpless and desperate. She prayed constantly for her daughter to be healed, to be normal, to succeed. Every prayer came from fear and reinforced the belief that her daughter was somehow incomplete or broken. When Jennifer found Joel's teachings, she understood her mistake. She'd been treating her daughter as darkness that needed light added to it. Joel taught her to recognize her daughter's true identity as light itself, as consciousness that couldn't be limited by any diagnosis or condition. Jennifer stopped praying for change and started recognizing the perfection already present. The transformation took time, but was undeniable. Within 1 school year, her daughter's reading comprehension jumped 3 grade levels. Teachers were amazed, but Jennifer knew what had happened. She'd stopped treating her daughter as a problem needing fixing and started seeing her as the light of the world. That recognition and consciousness produced healing that no amount of worried prayer could achieve. Matteo had built a meditation practice over 12 years, sitting daily for an hour, trying to quiet his mind and find inner peace. He experienced moments of calm but always returned to his anxious, restless thoughts. He believed he needed more practice, better technique, deeper meditation. Joel Goldsmith's teaching completely disrupted his approach. Joel taught that meditation isn't about achieving a peaceful state or silencing thoughts. It's about recognizing the consciousness that's already peaceful, already silent, already perfect, regardless of whether thoughts are present or absent. Matteo realized he'd been treating consciousness as a future achievement rather than his present identity. He stopped trying to improve his meditation and simply rested as the awareness that was already present. Within weeks, his relationship with thoughts transformed completely. They still came and went, but they no longer disturbed him because he knew himself as the light that witnesses them. His 12 years of effort hadn't been wasted, but this simple recognition accomplished what all that striving couldn't. Alexandra worked in a high-stress corporate environment where anxiety was considered normal. Everyone around him took medication or drank heavily to cope. He'd tried both and felt trapped in a cycle of temporary relief followed by increasing dependence. He couldn't see a way out that didn't involve quitting his job or breaking down completely. Joel's teaching on being the light offered Alexandra a completely different approach. Instead of trying to eliminate stress or manage anxiety, he learned to recognize the consciousness that existed before stress, underneath anxiety, witnessing the whole corporate drama without being damaged by it. That consciousness was his true identity, the light of the world. Alexander practiced this recognition during meetings, deadlines, and conflicts. When pressure mounted, he would pause and recognize, I am the light observing this pressure, not the person feeling pressured. Over 4 months, his experience of work transformed entirely. The environment hadn't changed, but his identity had. He was no longer the anxious employee, but the light witnessing an anxious employee thought pattern. If these transformation stories inspire you to recognize your true identity as light, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's revolutionary teaching, subscribe for more consciousness-shifting wisdom, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your own spiritual journey today. Beyond recognizing yourself as light, Joel taught a practical technique he called impersonalization. When problems arise, whether physical pain, emotional distress, or external circumstances, you must see them as impersonal. They're not happening to you because nothing can happen to light. They're simply conditions passing through the space of consciousness you are. This technique sounds simple but requires practice. When pain comes, your first reaction is, this is my pain. This is happening to me. Joel taught you to immediately correct this. Pain is appearing in consciousness, but I am the consciousness, not the pain. This subtle shift in identification changes everything about how the body and mind respond to difficulty. The key is consistency. Every time a problem presents itself, you practice this recognition. I am not the person with this problem. I am the light of consciousness in which this problem appears. As you strengthen this recognition, problems begin losing their power. Not because you've defeated them through willpower, but because you've stopped giving them the only power they ever had, your identification with them. Joel introduced another complementary practice he called the art of spiritual receptivity. Being the light isn't about projecting energy or forcing change. It's about receiving the truth that already exists. Most people approach spirituality with effort and striving. Joel taught the opposite. Relax into what you already are, rather than reaching for what you think you should become. Spiritual receptivity means creating inner silence where truth can reveal itself. Not the silence of stopped thoughts, but the silence of stopped seeking. When you recognize yourself as light, you stop searching for light. In that cessation of search, deeper recognitions naturally emerge. You begin seeing that everything you need is already present in consciousness itself. Practice this by taking 3 minutes several times daily to simply rest as awareness. Don't try to achieve anything or experience anything special. Just be the consciousness that you are. Notice how this consciousness doesn't need improvement or development. It's already complete. As you practice this receptivity regularly, your entire approach to life shifts from effort to recognition, from doing to being. Joel taught that being the light has immediate practical applications in relationships. When someone attacks you verbally or treats you unkindly, your habitual reaction is to defend yourself or counterattack. This reaction comes from identifying as the person being attacked. But if you're the light, who exactly is being attacked? The light can't be harmed by words or actions. This doesn't mean becoming passive or allowing abuse. It means responding from your true identity rather than from wounded ego. When you know yourself as light, you can address harmful behavior without being damaged by it. You can set boundaries without inner turmoil. You can say no without guilt because the light simply recognizes what's true and acts accordingly. Maria practiced this when her mother criticized her life choices during family gatherings. Previously, these interactions left her feeling devastated for days. Using Joel's teaching, she recognized herself as the light witnessing criticism, not as the criticized daughter. She could then respond calmly, set appropriate boundaries, and leave the conversation without carrying emotional damage. Her mother's behavior didn't change, but Maria's experience of it transformed completely. The final complementary technique Joel emphasized is the practice of recognizing light in others. When you see people as limited, sick, troubled, or wrong, you're not seeing them accurately. You're seeing through the lens of human judgment. Joel taught that every person is equally the light of the world, whether they know it or not. Your recognition of their true nature supports their awakening. This practice challenges you deeply. It's relatively easy to recognize yourself as light in meditation. It's much harder to recognize the light in the person who cuts you off in traffic, or the family member who constantly disappoints you. Yet this is where Joel's teaching becomes transformative in daily life. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to see truly. When you practice seeing others as light, something remarkable happens. Not only does your judgment and reactivity decrease, but people often respond to you differently. They sense being seen truly, perhaps for the first time. Your recognition of their light calls it forth. This is how being the light of the world becomes practical service, not by doing things for people, but by seeing who they really are. The most common obstacle students face with this teaching is the mind's insistence that it can't be this simple. You've spent decades believing you're a limited person with real problems. Now someone says you're actually the light of consciousness, and problems are just passing appearances. The mind rebels. It presents evidence. Your bank account, your health issues, your relationship struggles. Joel encountered this resistance constantly. He taught that the mind will always argue for limitation because that's its function. The mind exists to create and solve problems. When you recognize yourself as light, you're operating from a dimension beyond mind. You're not trying to convince the mind of anything. You're simply resting as the consciousness that witnesses the mind's arguments. The breakthrough comes when you stop waiting for the mind to agree before you recognize your true nature. You don't need the mind's permission to be what you are. The light doesn't require the mind's validation. This is why Joel emphasized practice over understanding. You may not fully comprehend how you can be the light while problems still appear, but you can practice the recognition anyway. Understanding follows experience, not the other way around. Another significant challenge is maintaining this recognition during intense difficulty. It's one thing to remember you're the light during quiet meditation. It's entirely different when you're facing a frightening diagnosis, financial crisis, or relationship breakdown. The emotional intensity pulls you back into identifying as the suffering person. This is where most students feel the teaching fails them. Joel addressed this directly. He taught that intense difficulty is actually the most powerful opportunity for this recognition. When everything seems to be falling apart, you have a choice. Identify as the person to whom terrible things are happening, or recognize yourself as the consciousness in which terrible things are appearing. The first choice leads to suffering piled on suffering. The second leads to peace in the midst of storm. Rachel experienced this when her husband suddenly left after 20 years of marriage. The pain was overwhelming. But she'd been practicing Joel's teaching for 2 years. In her darkest moments, she would return to the recognition. I am the light of consciousness witnessing devastating emotions, not the devastated person. This didn't eliminate the grief, but it prevented the grief from destroying her. She moved through the divorce with surprising strength because she knew her true identity remained untouched. The third major obstacle is confusing being the light with spiritual bypassing. Some students use this teaching to avoid feeling emotions or facing practical responsibilities. They say I'm just consciousness, so this job loss doesn't really affect me, while failing to take necessary action. This distortion of Joel's teaching creates more problems than it solves. Joel was clear about this distinction. Being the light doesn't mean denying human experience or avoiding practical life. It means knowing your true identity while fully engaging with circumstances. You pay your bills, you feel your emotions, you take appropriate action. But you do all of this from the recognition that you are the consciousness in which these activities occur, not a limited person struggling through them. The test is simple. If your spiritual practice increases your peace and effectiveness in life, you're on the right path. If it's making you passive, avoidant, or disconnected from reality, you've misunderstood the teaching. The light engages fully with life while remaining untouched by life. It's not detachment from experience, but clear seeing through experience to the consciousness that makes all experience possible. The fourth challenge involves dealing with physical pain and illness. Students often report that they can recognize themselves as light during emotional difficulties, but physical pain seems to prove they're just a body. Joel taught extensively on this because he himself experienced physical challenges and found freedom through recognition of true identity. The key understanding is that pain is a sensation appearing in consciousness, not something happening to consciousness itself. When pain arises, immediately there's awareness of pain. That awareness, that consciousness that knows pain is present, is who you are. The pain is an object being observed. You are the subject, the light, doing the observing. This distinction must be practiced repeatedly until it becomes natural. Gregory had chronic back pain that doctors couldn't effectively treat for 8 years. Using Joel's teaching, he practiced recognizing himself as the consciousness aware of pain rather than as the person in pain. He described it as watching pain from a distance, even though the sensation remained intense. Over 6 months of consistent practice, the pain's intensity gradually decreased. After a year, it was completely gone. His doctors found no medical explanation for the healing that occurred. If these obstacle-breaking techniques are revealing new possibilities for your spiritual journey, like this video to support consciousness-expanding content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which challenge you're most ready to transform through recognition of your true identity as light. Advanced practice involves recognizing yourself as light during everyday activities, not just during crisis or meditation. Joel taught that the purpose of spiritual realization isn't to escape life, but to bring the light of consciousness into every moment. This means practicing awareness while working, eating, talking, driving. You begin living from your true identity rather than visiting it occasionally. Start with simple activities. While washing dishes, recognize that you're not really the person washing dishes. You're the consciousness in which the activity of dishwashing appears. While talking with someone, Notice that you're the awareness witnessing conversation, not just the person speaking. These small recognitions throughout the day strengthen your identity as light until it becomes your natural state. James was a surgeon who initially thought Joel's teaching was interesting philosophy, but had no practical application to his demanding work. Then he began practicing awareness during surgery. He recognized himself as the consciousness in which surgical skill appeared, not as the limited person trying not to make mistakes. His performance improved dramatically. He described feeling guided by something beyond his trained knowledge, making decisions with unexpected clarity and confidence. Joel taught advanced students about the principle of light revealing itself. As you consistently practice recognizing your true nature, consciousness begins spontaneously showing you things you never learned through study. You have sudden insights about situations, clear knowing about decisions, creative solutions appearing without effortful thinking. This is the light of consciousness operating without mental interference. This isn't mystical or supernatural. It's natural functioning when you're not blocking it with identification as a limited person. Your true nature as light includes intelligence far beyond mental reasoning. Joel called this spiritual sense, the capacity to know truth directly without mental processing. As you rest in your identity as light, this spiritual sense activates naturally. Patricia experienced this in her business. She'd struggled for years to grow her company through careful planning and market analysis. After 6 months of practicing Joel's teaching on being the light, she began receiving clear insights about business direction that contradicted conventional wisdom. She followed these intuitions despite fear. Within 18 months, her company had tripled in size. She attributed the success entirely to learning to trust the intelligence of consciousness itself, rather than relying only on her limited mind. Another advanced application involves recognizing yourself as light during sleep and dreams. Joel taught that consciousness doesn't sleep, only the body and mind sleep. As you strengthen your identity as awareness, you begin experiencing yourself as the light that witnesses even sleeping and dreaming. This opens dimensions of spiritual experience that most people never access. The practice is simple but requires patience. Before sleep, consciously recognize yourself as the awareness that will witness the body falling asleep. Don't try to stay awake. Just maintain recognition that you are the consciousness in which sleep occurs, not the person who sleeps. Over time, you'll notice awareness persisting through sleep states. You'll remember dreams more clearly and sometimes experience lucid awareness during dreaming. Stephen practiced this for 8 months before experiencing his first breakthrough. He remained aware as his body fell asleep, watching thoughts slow down and consciousness shift into dream state, while maintaining recognition of his identity as light. He described it as the most profound spiritual experience of his life, proving beyond doubt that he was not the body or mind, but the consciousness that witnesses all states. This recognition transformed his entire relationship with existence. Joel's most advanced teaching on being the light involves recognizing that there's no separate you being the light. Even the statement "you are the light" eventually must be transcended. At the highest level of recognition, there's only light. There's no person who has light or is light. There's just consciousness being itself, appearing as all experience, all apparent individuals, all of existence. This teaching can sound abstract, but it has immediate practical application. When you finally release the last identification with being a separate individual who has spiritual identity, total freedom emerges. There's no longer anyone trying to maintain recognition or achieve anything spiritual. There's just the light recognizing itself everywhere, as everything, including what you've called yourself. This is where Joel's teaching ultimately points, not to an improved spiritual person, but to the recognition that the person itself is an appearance in light. When this is seen clearly, the entire spiritual search ends, not because you've achieved some ultimate state, but because you've recognized what was always true. The light has always been recognizing itself. You've always been that recognition. Nothing has ever been outside of or separate from the light that you are. Everything you've learned through this teaching culminates in a simple practice that changes your entire life. Each morning before getting caught in the day's activities, pause and recognize, I am the light of the world. Not as an affirmation trying to make something true, but as recognition of what already is. Spend 3 minutes resting as that light, that consciousness, That awareness, throughout the day, whenever you remember, return to this recognition. Don't wait for problems to arise. Practice during neutral moments, while drinking coffee, waiting at traffic lights, between tasks. These small returns to truth accumulate. They build an identity foundation that can't be shaken by circumstances. Your sense of who you are shifts from the changing person to the unchanging light. At night before sleep, recognize again. I am the light that witnesses this body preparing for rest. I am the consciousness that remains awake while the body sleeps. This brackets your entire day in truth. You begin in recognition, you return to recognition throughout the day, and you end in recognition. This simple practice, done consistently, transforms your life more than any complex spiritual system. The transformation Joel promised isn't just personal peace or better circumstances. It's a complete shift in how you experience existence. When you truly know yourself as light, fear loses its foundation. What is there to fear when you recognize you're the consciousness that witnesses everything but can't be damaged by anything? Death itself becomes just another appearance in the light you are. This doesn't mean problems disappear or life becomes perfect in human terms. It means you're no longer imprisoned by circumstances. You remain the light regardless of what appears. Health or illness, wealth or poverty, success or failure, all become movements in consciousness that you witness without losing your identity. This is the freedom Joel experienced and taught. Marcus lived this truth during his final months with terminal illness. Having practiced Joel's teaching for 5 years, he faced death with remarkable peace. He told his family, "I'm watching this body decline, but I'm not declining. The light I am has never been sick and can't die." His peaceful transition inspired everyone around him. They witnessed someone who truly recognized their identity as eternal consciousness rather than temporary form. Joel Goldsmith's ultimate gift was making the light accessible to ordinary people. You don't need special abilities, years of study, or guru initiation. You need only the willingness to recognize what you already are. This teaching is radically democratic. The light of consciousness is equally present in everyone. Your education, status, or spiritual background doesn't matter. The light simply is. This means you can begin immediately. Right now, as you process these words, notice the awareness that's reading them. That awareness is the light. It's already present. It's already who you are. You don't become it through practice. You simply stop overlooking it. The spiritual search ends the moment you recognize what's already here. Joel spent 50 years helping people make this recognition. His books, recordings, and teachings all point to the same truth. You are the light of the world, right now, exactly as you are. Not in the future when you've improved yourself, not if you meditate more or become more spiritual. Now, the recognition changes everything while changing nothing. You remain the same person with the same circumstances, but you know your true identity. That knowing is the difference between suffering and freedom. As we close, understand that being the light of the world isn't a teaching to believe. It's a recognition to confirm through direct experience. Test it. When problems arise, practice recognizing yourself as the consciousness witnessing problems rather than as the person having problems. Notice what changes. When emotions surge, recognize yourself as the awareness that observes emotions rather than as the emotional person. Watch what happens. Give this practice 90 days of consistent application. That's all Joel asked of his students. 90 days of returning to the recognition I am the light of consciousness throughout each day. If after that time you haven't experienced significant transformation in your peace, clarity, and freedom, you can return to whatever approach you were using before. But he knew that genuine practice produces undeniable results. The light you are has been waiting for this recognition your entire life. It's never been absent. It's been right here, reading these words, listening to these ideas, being the awareness that makes all experience possible. The search for what you are ends the moment you recognize what you've always been. The light of the world isn't somewhere else. It's not someone else. It's you. It always has been. Welcome home to your true identity. If this teaching has expanded your spiritual understanding and revealed your true nature as the light of consciousness, like this video to illuminate this path for others. Subscribe for transformative Joel Goldsmith wisdom and comment, "I am the light," to confirm your recognition and commitment to living from your eternal identity.